Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, November 4th, 2016. Who wants to have an election? Not me. Okay, I guess we eventually have to get around to this thing. But, okay, we're going to round up everything we can today. Jam-packed schedule, of course, although no actual plan for exactly what to get to. There's so much, it's like drinking from a fire hose. So, grab a straw, I guess, if you're into that, and we'll do our best to round up everything we can in what will, I believe, be the final live show before the election. Monday and Tuesday, we are touring the country with the kids. That's right. We're not working on the election this year. It's a disgrace, really. I think I'm disqualified from commenting on it from this point forward. But, well, that's what it is to raise young kids these days, and they're just not interested in working on the election at this point. Although, I must say, the older of the two has been, well, a little more tuned in to the horribleness that is Donald Trump than I thought he would be. I can hardly avoid it, I assume, in this house. Anyway, we will round up stories with Greg Dworkin one more time. I know he volunteered to make some predictions yesterday. I think he volunteered me to make some predictions, too, and I don't do it. I'm just afraid to make predictions. I just don't like doing that. But anyway, we will round things up with him. I've got a number of stories, things that are burning up the wires. Josie Duffy Rice can hopefully make another stop by to tell us a little bit more, not only about America's worst prosecutors. Pardon me, my goodness. I have Pepe the Frog in my throat today, I guess. This may be the last time that happens, thankfully, and tell us about some of the worst prosecutors in America who are facing the voters on Tuesday and what you can do about it. Plus, I am sure, much, much more. And where to start today? I don't know. Well, I've had at least one request for the latest Newsweek entry from Kurt Eichenwald, and I am pretty sure that will be on Greg's list. I haven't got the preview peek at the list this morning, but I do believe I saw him retweet Eichenwald's tweet with the link to his news story. So I'm pretty sure that it will at least be discussed. I don't think we have to worry too much about that one. And let's see. We'll scroll back down and see if I can find that request. Just sort of hey, this looks like a good piece, and I don't have time to read it. Could you read it on the air? We've gotten to become sort of books on tape service, or newspapers on tape. Not a bad gig if you can get it. Of course, if it was a gig, well, it would feel a lot different. Anyway, let's see. Yes, Bill in Portland, Maine reminds me, don't take the kids on any old train trestles. We're going to avoid that, I think, for the time being. Well, we're going into low country, so there's nothing quite like what we nearly fell through last time. Those of you following on Twitter would have experienced that heart attack along with us. And, man, I know, it's, I already see, Monica, who, tweeted us yesterday, Mommy CA20, who's in Maryland, I don't know, says, I can't believe you guys would leave us alone on Monday and Tuesday. How can we keep sane right before the election? The answer is go out and work. I'd love to say that I do this on purpose to force you out of the house and get you to sign up as a volunteer and help people get to the polls, make calls, etc. So I will. I don't know why I'm hesitating to do that. It's absolutely my plan. Yes, you bet. And there's nobody who can say otherwise and be believed. Who are you going to believe? The FBI? Come on. Anyway, that's been a hell of a story, hasn't it? My goodness. Well, we'll catch up on some of that. Some of why Vladimir Putin's Russia is backing Donald Trump. That would, of course, be the title of the new Eichenwald piece. And a number of other fun items that I think are relevant to the election, or just relevant to, I don't know, the atmosphere in which we're holding the election, including, among them, here's something that wouldn't ordinarily, I don't think, make our radar, but it's Friday, and this is the day. My gosh, I really can't clear my throat at all today. This is the sort of thing I like to throw in on a Friday anyway. But this strikes me. This is one of those stories which you begin to say, well, it's not political per se. That is to say, about electoral politics. But it is. Because everything is. Washington Post piece by Jake Russell. This one, have you heard this story about what was going on as between the men's and women's soccer teams at Harvard? If you haven't heard the story, I think this recaps it. But essentially, what has happened here is that at some point, the school newspaper, the Harvard Crimson, among other people, get wind of the fact that the men's soccer team is circulating among themselves, essentially, what they were calling scouting reports about the women's soccer team, which was essentially a sort of ratings system that I assume maybe once started. Well, I don't know. There's no way I can figure out exactly what was going on in their heads, but they were rating them by looks, but it grew from there, and it basically became a kind of, as it says here in the article, a sexually explicit scouting reports, which graded recruits on the women's soccer team based on their appearance and a few other things, if you could use your imagination a little bit. I haven't seen the report, certainly, and I haven't read the Harvard Crimson account of it either. But what I'm most interested in here is the headline of the Washington Post piece is, Harvard cancels men's soccer season due to sexually explicit scouting reports. Well, all right. Except for the fact that most of the season is over. But, of course, we're coming to the important part here. Well, let me read you the article here. Harvard has canceled the remainder of its men's soccer season due to what the university has described as a continued production of sexually explicit scouting reports by players which graded recruits of the women's soccer team based on their appearance, according to the school's newspaper, the Harvard Crimson. The practice of creating these reports dates back to a July 2012 email string created by members of the men's team. The reports rate incoming women's soccer recruits on a numerical scale based on their sex appeal. That's not an unfamiliar scale, I think, to most people. Not that they approve of it, but you get the idea. Donald Trump still does it, right? Still uses the 1 to 10 scale for people. The ratings included photos from the recruits' social media accounts, their positions on the team, assigned hypothetical sexual positions, and vulgar descriptive paragraphs assigned to each recruit, per a report last week from the Crimson. I think that's probably the most polite description you can give this thing without actually reading it out loud and telling you what's in it. I mean, it doesn't sound good. And you can imagine exactly what they would be doing. And you can imagine that they probably just thought, it's among ourselves, we're just kidding. I would never say that to one of these women to their face, which actually makes it that much worse, I think, in a way. Always, really. But you can see where they thought they were just goofing around. And that's what makes a story like this important. No, it's not exactly. It's not just you goofing around. It has ramifications elsewhere. Certainly if it leaks. But even if it doesn't leak, why are you doing this? First of all, you're from Harvard. I mean, I thought you were above this sort of thing. But I guess not. Boys will be boys anywhere. But that doesn't mean you can't punish them for doing it. And I'm just impressed with the fact that Harvard actually did. And, I don't know if that's the full extent of what the punishment ought to be, but certainly there will be people who are pushing back on, well, why should not everyone on the soccer team participated in this? Why should they all be punished? And they can't go to the NCAA tournament that was, they were scheduled, I think if they got one more win over, their next opponent, which Columbia. I don't know how Columbia soccer is, doesn't matter, but they're 10-3-2 at this point. 2 regular season games remaining. But they now forfeit their ability to compete in the Ivy League championships. the NCAA tournament. They would have clinched an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament with a victory over Columbia on Saturday. And I like it. I like it a lot. And part of the reason is, of course, this is a team sport. Certainly there will be, I hope, some players who didn't participate in this ridiculousness, but they knew, I'm sure. And, you know, sometimes it's a lot to expect of kids, essentially, still kids, but of course, above the age of majority, many of them, to come down on teammates in front of the rest of the team and say, we can't do this, this has to stop. But you're going to Harvard, and everybody is supposed to jump out of the way and give you a job because of all the awesome leadership training and whatnot that you're getting, becoming prepared at Harvard to lead society into the future. And you can't even lead a soccer team out of the past. All right, yeah. You missed your opportunity in your senior year to play in the NCAA soccer tournaments. First of all, who cares? Second of all, if you didn't want to lose that, maybe you could have stepped up and done something. So I assume that there's probably more punishment in the offing, too, probably for the worst offenders. But I also assume that by the end of it, well, if it wasn't soccer, I would assume we would see some conservative pushback and people saying it's unfair to you should compartmentalize. You can put them on academic probation, although academics have less to do with this than the athletics does. Or you could expel them or whatever. But I mean, if you expel them, obviously they can't play in the soccer tournament either. I was just pleased to see a swift response that will mean something at least to the soccer players, although it might be a good idea to think about sending a message to non-soccer playing male students at Harvard and say, you know, you don't have to get this Harvard degree, guys. We don't have to rubber stamp your ticket to the good life. We can revoke that, you know. And I guess for some of the worst perpetrators, hopefully they're already thinking about that. I just thought I'd put that on the record. I thought it was an interesting story for a number of reasons, not the least of which was that the newspaper also recently published a collective response from the women players, which was pretty heartfelt and is excerpted therein, and I'll include this in the roundup of links that I give to Scott, so you can all share it and peruse it at your leisure if you have any over the coming weekend. Greg, I've given you exactly 3 minutes of leisure time.
Yeah, it's been great.
I can see by the counter going on. Well, I've been here. Thanks for coming. Thanks for wading through that one. That was an amazing story, and I'm sure
it was. You know,
worse is happening elsewhere.
You're looking at the male members of the Harvard soccer team,
mm-hmm.
and you can give a pass, I guess, to some of them, but not the ones that, for example, have mothers.
Yeah,
and have had contact with females, you know, in their life, and who should know better. The ones without moms, I suppose I could, say, okay, maybe you don't get it. But, if you have mothers or sisters, I mean, what does it take to make you a little bit more sensitized to the fact that, you don't occupy the only niche in humanity?
And they're humanity. Now, they definitely know humans. The game involves humans at a minimum.
Jeez,
and
they're
they
not
don't
even
want
the best
that
school
to
in
happen
Cambridge.
Yeah, well, then there's also that. This is important, and it's incumbent upon a school like Harvard to take that on. I love it. It's fantastic, and it's great to see. It isn't doing it to, let's say, the University of Alabama football team if something were to come up that. In that
racism
context.
and sexism are in the blue states as well as the red states. Let's be very clear about that. You can be a jerk anywhere. It's not like it only happens,
right.
On football day. It happens everywhere, and it's something to be aware of and watch. And maybe, it's interesting that one of my friends on Twitter, Timothy McBride, who's a healthcare wonk, pointed out that perhaps the Trump campaign has made a huge mistake by having Melania Trump give a speech yesterday in Philadelphia on bullying.
Oh, well, yeah, that was ridiculous.
Because all it does is bring attention to Donald Trump and the fact that that's what he's all about.
Yeah, that was a little bit weird. I don't know how big of a mistake it was just because...
Well, if you want to close the campaign with 3 or 4 days focusing on Trump and everything bad about him, that was a great way to refocus everybody's attention.
Well, all the
Trump
things that
didn't
are bad
make any
about him
gaffes
work
in the
very
last
well
3
for him.
days. Therefore, nothing counts that he did in the last year and a half. Some of the dumber, analysis that one sees, like a third of the country is voted, and the women vote happens to be higher than the men vote. The men vote right now.
Folk.
And the idea that none of this stuff matters, that stories like you read from the Harvard Crimson doesn't, remind people of some of the other stuff that's going on is, just that's not how it works. That's why I like that who do you think will win question more than the who are you going to vote for question, because it's a whole gestalt. It's a whole, big picture of everything that's going on that gets incorporated into who do you think will win.
Yes.
So who do I think will win? Well, I think Hillary will win, but
Okay.
Let's look at what's going on right now. Tracking polls. Hillary Clinton ticks up another point in the tracking polls in the sense that the IBD tip is tied and hasn't changed in a couple of days. The LA Times poll, very pro-Trump, again ticked a point in Clinton's favor. The ABC Washington Post poll, undoubtedly the best of the trackers, now has Clinton with a 3-point lead after having Trump lead only a couple of days ago. So that Trump plus one setting, like October 30th, is still in the tracker, so it'll drop off tomorrow, or the remnants of that will drop off tomorrow. And I expect it to go up even higher. The Trump campaign is reporting to the Clinton campaign is reporting to John Harwood that from their perspective, they had a couple of bad days and now they think they're back to where they were about a week ago. And about a week ago, they had a pretty solid, and that's the word they used. We think we have a solid lead. It's probably a 4 or 5 point lead in their own polling. And they think they're on their way to victory. And there are polls that do show 4 or 5 point leads. For example, the Reuters poll. You can find them nationally. And it'll be very interesting to see by Monday, and certainly over the weekend, where good trackers like the ABC Post tracking poll wind up. Now, again, trackers are best for which way they're going, not so much the actual number. And we know at this particular point in time that these are state-by-state races, so that's really what's important.
Okay, yes,
but,
right.
But one of the things that I think is different this year, and where I take issue with Nate Silver, not Nate Cohn and Nate Silver, is the idea that we have to overreact to every single little poll that comes out now.
Oh my God! Like that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Which, and all of us, oh my goodness, we go from 85 to 67% chance of Clinton winning because we had this one poll, and what about New Hampshire?
Yes.
And, look, I mean, the fact of the matter is, at this particular point in time, the polls almost don't matter anymore. For a year, people have known who they were going to vote for. And what happens is when you get bad news, you have this differential non-response, as it's called. That is to say, Comey comes out and says something, and the Clinton voters get a little depressed and they stop answering polls, so their numbers drop a little bit. And then, they've gained a little bit of confidence because, it wasn't the huge big thing we thought it might have been. I mean, she's not indicted. And
right.
It was a bogus thing. And by the way, what the heck was Comey doing? And that takes a couple of days. And then that fades, and then you're back to where you are before.
Yes.
So that's, on the one hand, going to drive the who's going to win prognosticators depending upon how sensitive you are to that. And if it turns out that you're not that sensitive to it, you don't move that much. Let me give you an example. New York Times, 84% chance of Clinton winning. That's down from 91. They're pretty sensitive. 538, 67% chance. They're very sensitive. Huffington Post, not sensitive at all. They're just looking at the polls. 98% chance of Clinton winning.
Okay.
Sam Wang, 99% chance, and Daily Kos, 91% chance.
Right.
So those three don't really change that much. Daily Kos is just looking at state polls. And when I say Daily Kos, I'm talking about Drew Linzer, political scientist, nonpartisan. And the markets, which are very sensitive, are about 83. It was interesting because Nate Silver was saying, well, don't dump on us because we're so pessimistic. We're just like the markets. Well, actually, not so much anymore. The markets are at 83. New York Times at 84, 538 at 67. So basically, you have a prediction here that Hillary Clinton has anywhere between a 67 and a 99% chance of winning.
Okay, well, that's still 2/3 and up.
Yeah, but it's not all that helpful because they're so divergent. And one can argue, well, that's because of the uncertainty of this election. And to Nate's credit, Nate Silver's credit, saying Nate Silver because Nate Cohen does the New York Times Upshot part of it.
Right.
To his credit, we had the Jonathans, now we have the Nates.
Yeah.
So the Nate Corner basically acknowledges that there can be some polling uncertainty, and I'll give you a great example of polling uncertainty. The CNN poll that said that Trump is 6 points ahead in Nevada.
Okay.
Right? That's just flat out wrong.
So it would appear. Okay.
So here, how do we know that? We know that from early votes. So let's go to John Ralston, who's the expert. Okay, and yesterday, what happened yesterday? Day 13 of early voting in Clark County, that's Las Vegas, the big population center in Nevada, the rest being desert, maybe for Reno, but the rest being desert. Day 13 of early voting in Clark 2012, the Democrats were ahead 56-73. Day 13 of early voting in Clark 2016, D's ahead 57-94. I told you it looked a lot like 2012, he says. A huge day for Dems in Clark County yesterday. Democrats won by nearly 6,000 votes. Mr. Trump, they have built that firewall above 60,000. In other words, there's going to be enough, and I think we're just about at the end, one more day, of early voting in Nevada. And the Democratic lead, based on who is voting, is going to be large enough so it's going to be almost impossible for Trump to win. So the polls may say that Nevada is a toss-up because there's a couple of good Nevada polls that are older, and then there's a Nevada poll from CNN that's just wrong but recent. It's not a toss-up. She's practically already won it already. And so what's different this year is that we don't just have Nate Silver and nobody else. We have 5 or 6 different prognosticators doing similar things, and we have Twitter. And because of Twitter, we have a much better handle on what the early vote is looking at. And as we go forward and get closer and closer to Tuesday, that early vote, already banked, becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So you're going to have 70% of Nevada voting done by the time Election Day comes. You're going to have 70% or more of Florida voting done by the time Election Day comes. And that's pretty big.
That's pretty good. And good for it means less lines at the very least. If
right.
nothing else.
Which is also an excellent, excellent thing.
Yes.
So what do we have here for any more on Nevada? No, but I think that's really the significant number here. What about Florida? Florida's the big one. And it's just fascinating here in terms of what's happening with Florida. The bottom line with Florida is that they've already achieved as many early votes now as they did in 2012 when early voting was finished, and I think they got 4 days left.
Oh, how?
I'm not sure exactly. I have to go back to see exactly when Florida ends, but Nevada ends before Florida does. I think we get a weekend in there for Florida that Nevada doesn't have.
Yeah.
But
some states, yes.
The number of and Mike McDonald is the expert on all of this. What do we have on Florida here? Here's reporting some of this stuff from this morning. Iowa, no, let's go down. Arizona, Florida. Given how high overall early vote is up in Florida, it would be a huge problem if the African American turnout wasn't up. But yesterday was the largest turnout of black voters so far, 55,000. Remember, and this was the day before. This is not yesterday, Thursday. This is the day before Wednesday. And so the Florida black vote, we call it black because it's a combination of Caribbean American and African American.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is actually rising. And yesterday Obama was there. And when we get the numbers today that we don't have yet, it's going to turn out to be larger still. In fact, Florida could hit 5.2 million early voters today.
Don't hit them.
So what do we get? As of 5 a.m., Floridians had cast, this is Mark Caputo. As of 5 a.m., Floridians had cast a record 4.9 million pre-election day ballots, 40% by Republicans and 39.8% by Democrats. So that's a GOP lead of 9,700 raw votes.
Uh-huh.
Again, we don't know who they voted for.
Right. Just
and,
people who showed
and
up.
0.2 percentage points 4 days before Election Day. That should concern the GOP. At this point yesterday morning, it was 0.4 votes. For some historical perspective, the Democrats also have reason to fret because in 2012 they actually led the GOP by 2.2 votes. Now, that cushion's gone. But there's more people voting, and there's two big pieces that matter here. The people who are not affiliated by party.
Right, okay.
Okay. So the non-white share of the Florida early vote was 31.3, and among non-party affiliated people, it's 35. So the non-white share of those who aren't affiliated with a party is higher and more diverse than the state itself.
Higher and more.
170,000 more Hispanics have voted. Now, I was wondering, what do those non-party affiliated people actually look like? And remember that survey that said that 28% of Republicans already had voted for Clinton?
Oh, yes.
And that Clinton was going to win by 8%?
I do.
That might be an outlier in terms of the actual final numbers. We can't know that until everybody votes. But Tom Bonnier, who runs that service, TargetSmart, in response to a question I asked him, the question on the table was, who exactly is in the non-party affiliated group? Who's in that basket? And certainly Latinos, Hispanics, and some Black, Caribbean, and American Africans. And what's the breakdown? And he wrote back and said, well, it's 21.8% Hispanic, 6.4% Black, and 65% white. And 17.8% of those non-party affiliates are 18 to 35 years old. So those particular groups, Hispanic, Black, and young, are very likely to be voting Clinton.
Yeah.
You can't know that, but they're very likely. So just like in North Carolina, the non-party affiliate is going to turn out to be important. We just, unlike Republican versus Democrat, we can't automatically know where it's going to go. But we get the idea, and Nate Cohen has done this in North Carolina. The non-party affiliated group in North Carolina tends to vote Democratic. It's not split 50-50. So there's going to be some group of Democratic votes in there that one has already banked. And that's great. So it's really hard to read the tea leaves here and say anything about Florida. With Nevada, you can look at it and say we practically got the state won if we haven't gotten it won already. With Florida, you can look at it and say we're holding our own. Clinton may wind up with a very, very narrow lead here again, like Obama did in some years. But you can't look at the early vote and say, okay, I know what's going to happen. So Florida remains a little difficult to predict, but since it's our last live show before the election, I'm going to predict that we win Florida, and it's going to be smaller than Armando's 5 points.
Okay.
Or to be fair to Armando, he amended it, smaller than Armando's 4 points.
Or he bumped it back down to 4.
He bumped it back down.
All right. Well, I think
we win, but I think it's less
between
than that.
win and 4, but okay.
And of course, with that, she wins the election.
Yes. Well, that'll be it.
Okay. So again, going
back
to another factor here, and this is Mark Caputo again, why Democrats and Clinton might be in better shape in Florida than it looks. Democratic consultant Steve Shale pointed out yesterday that about 50,000 of the total early voting Republicans this election were registered as Democrats in 2012. So in other words, these are the panhandle Democrats that have always voted Republican.
Yeah.
And they've taken themselves off the Democratic roll and they've put themselves on the Republican roll so that now you can see what their true vote is. And even with that infusion of extra Republicans and a subtraction from Democrats are still holding their own. Why did they change party this year? So they could vote in the primary and vote for Trump.
Okay.
That's what drove them to finally, after all these years, change their registration.
Amazing. All right. Well, if they're willing to admit that, I guess that's fine.
Right. And again, independents have cast 20% of the ballot so far. So when you're looking at those non-party affiliates, which is not exactly the same thing as independents, nonetheless, these are huge early number votings for Florida. They're still on a pace for 72% or so of turnout. It might even be that. It might even be more than that. and tight race. That's all I can say about Florida.
All right. Armando is prepared to chime in on Florida. I don't know if he's coming. He's not here to say you're wrong in terms of.
I just wonder, given all the information we have about early voting, whether he's changed his mind about his number. I think we both agree that Clinton wins and that there's more or less. And this is another important point. There is no hidden Trump vote out there. There's no shy Trump voters. There's nothing about Trump that's shy. Nothing. Nothing about his voters either. However, there may well be people of color who haven't been counted who will vote in this election for various and sundry reasons, named Donald Trump. And I think that, and Armando has pointed this out, in many, many situations, and I have a whole different set of numbers on that, Latino voting is just hard to do unless you take your time to do it right, including bilingual. And it's a hidden vote in a lot of regular polling, which is another reason why I think that 538 may be wrong this year.
Okay. Well, let's add Armando.
So is it 4? Is it less than 4? Where does Armando stand?
Where do you stand, Armando?
I'd like to know what the early voting is going to be this weekend. And I guess I do disagree slightly with Greg. We might know this weekend if Clinton will win Florida.
Yep. It's possible.
Let's see how these 3 days go.
I don't think we know today.
We don't know today. And the main variable right now is we need to get African American vote up to 14 to 15% of the electorate.
Yeah, I think at 14 is the target because that's the registration number. I think it's like 13.6% are registered. But the thing is that, and this is something just to quickly talk about with our listeners. Armando knows this, but when you see African American or Black, Caribbean American, African American together voting in Florida, some people are talking about the absolute number of votes, which is up compared to 2012, and some people are talking about the percentage of the vote, which is down. But one of the reasons the percentage of the vote is down is because the Latino vote is so up.
White vote's up too.
The other numbers further down. Now,
white vote's up too.
White vote's up too. So if white votes go up and Latino votes go up a lot, then the percentage of everybody else is going to go down. They're going to have a smaller piece of the pie, but the pie's bigger. Right.
There's another important factor to look at when you look at the early vote, and it's particularly pronounced among Republican voters. They really, you always hear about cannibalization. Oh, you're taking away a voter who's going to vote on election day anyway. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly something to look at. But it's really more pronounced on the Republican side.
Yes.
Republican early voting is up, and when you look at the data, and Florida has a tremendously good voter file, by the way. You can't do this in most states. But you can see when somebody voted in the previous election, and that's why I can make this statement. There are more, to the tune of about 47,000, I believe was the last number I looked, 47,000 more early Republican voters who were election day voters in 2012 than Democrat voters who were voting early who were election day voters in 2012.
And not just 2012. A lot of those Republican voters are really regular voters, 2008, 2012, whereas the Democrats are bringing in new voters.
Right. No, the new voter numbers are clear. The Democrats are bringing in many new voters
and low propensity voters, as you might call them.
Yeah, very low. When you look at the numbers of when you say who didn't vote in 2012 versus the Democrat numbers are through the roof as compared to the Republicans. So the early voting shows it's tied, right? And you say, well, geez, don't we need to be ahead? We want to be ahead. But you've got to look a little deeper. And Florida, because of its voter file, allows you to do that. Now, I'm sure Greg has mentioned Steve Schell today. And Steve knows how to do all these things. And we're all, anxiously waiting for his report from last night. Now, we know that it's 1,800 vote difference right now, including all vote by mail and early votes.
Right. But it won't be by the end of the day.
Yeah, well, we'll pass them today, but that number there's two things that are important in that number to keep in mind, and why, frankly, most of us are very optimistic who follow this as it's gone right now. We had the one trouble spot is we need to, and by the way, let me just step back and say about the African American vote, you're absolutely right. that we really should look at percentages more than raw numbers. Raw numbers are important. It shows, when people talk about enthusiasm and yada yada, there's the enthusiasm is fine. But we have to look at in terms of a modeled electorate. You've heard about modeling, and one of the failures I think that I predict we'll find in polling is that modeling is going to be seen as superior to polling. And people are going to have to, and they'll get all complaints about it's going to be waiting and you shouldn't wait. But you've got to wait for race. And you've got to wait for race in a realistic way. And pollsters can't do it. Greg, you know this. The budgets for polling have gone way down this year. We're getting many less polls.
Right. And for example, in Nevada, you gotta call people 10, 15 times to get one answer in some of the Latino population. Exactly. When
it takes 20 times the effort to get a respondent that's Latino as to a white woman, just taking an example that Greg's probably pointed out, you're just not going to do it well. And Latino polling in the mainstream polls is terrible. You can't not pay attention to it. It's just wrong.
So I got some Univision polling you've probably seen. Can I just run this by you, Armando?
Yeah, go ahead. I think the Florida number's a little low, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But go ahead, run the numbers.
Right. This was a bipartisan group, Terrence Group and Ben Dixon, Amandi, Republican, and Democratic pollster, came out yesterday, and it's comparing the numbers for the Latino vote in 3 states, Arizona, Florida, and Nevada. And what they do is they look at it in terms of what was, just for ease of comparison, it doesn't mean this is the right number. It's not census data, but it's the exit polling from 2012. Let's take Florida, for example. In 2012, exit polling said that the Democrat won 60% of the Latino vote in Florida, and the Republican, which was Romney, won 39. So that's a 21-point in favor of Democrat by the exit polling in Florida. And this year in Florida, it's 60-30. It's a 30-point record-setting difference between the Republican and the Democrat, which is pretty impressive.
It is.
And it's only grown. It was 53-29 back in September.
This goes to the modeling issue. First of all, I don't believe Trump's going to get 30, but that's that's just me.
All right.
But second of all, what about that missing 10%?
1 or 2 Cubans will vote for him, won't they?
I think Clinton's going to win Cubans. That's one finding I disagree with in the poll. It had Trump winning Cubans by 7. I think it's going to be a narrow. I think Clinton's going to win Cubans narrowly by 2 or 3 points.
That'll be impressive. So they're extra missing 10 points. 2 for Gary Johnson, 3 for Jill Stein, 1 for other. That must be you. They were voting for you. And then don't know no answer is 4, and that 4 is going to vanish.
It's going to go somewhere.
Or it's going to come in. So here's the point.
Well, by percentage, either they won't vote, which is likely, because if you haven't made up your mind by now, what the heck is wrong with you? You're probably not voting at all.
Especially if you're Latino. Yeah. That's true.
Right, if you're undecided if you adjust Wednesday,
that, and by the way, Gary Johnson's not getting 5, and Jill Stein's not getting 2 either. If you're voting for Jill Stein and you're a Latino, you're not voting. I mean, come on. You're going to go up and stand in line to cast a vote for Jill Stein if you're a Latina.
Right. Jill Stein is getting 3% in this poll, and Gary Johnson.
That's not going to happen.
It's
Florida. Just not going to happen.
She's getting more than Gary Johnson. That is not going to happen, I don't think, anywhere.
Yeah, look, polling is an imperfect science. I mean,
Johnson
they do good work.
Johnson and Stein are parking lots. They're not real people.
Exactly.
They may be holograms, but that's where you go when you don't know what to do, but you do want to tell the pollster you're probably going to vote.
Exactly.
And if you say don't know, no answer, you're probably not going to vote.
That I don't know about. But the third-party candidates, I think, after all the – it's an interesting side story, but I think after all the brouhaha and hullabaloo about, 10% of the vote, or even is Gary Johnson going to get 15%? Remember that talk back in the day?
Yeah. Well, see what he does in New Mexico. It's the only state where he might get more than 5. He might. Right,
but the thing that bothered me about that,
by Tuesday he might not even get 5 in New Mexico. We don't know that.
Right, but Greg, think about this. there was all this talk about Gary Johnson and Jill Stein. At the end of the day, they're nothing, which we knew. So why did we pretend that they were important?
We did up until the time that they weren't in the debates, and then it was clear. And the funny thing in retrospect is, had they been in the debates and people actually saw them, they would have dropped even faster. Because you know what? They were terrible.
That's probably true. By the way, hats off to Bill Weld for his very, I think, principled statement about Hillary Clinton.
Yep. He's if you're looking for a decent Republican, that would be him, even though he's not a Republican anymore.
If we have to have a Republican in the administration, if we have an administration, I nominate Bill Weld.
All right, so that's Florida. Now, Arizona is also interesting. Why is Arizona closer? Because in 2012, the exit polling says the Latino vote in Arizona was 74-25 in favor of the Democrats. And right now, it's 67-18 in favor of Clinton. So it's about what it was in 2012. But if the total population voting grows and the margin stays the same, that favors the Democrats, and that's why they're making a play for Arizona. They may not quite get there, at least not this year, but that's why it's on the table. And then finally Nevada, and that is an important one. And this is interesting, in 2012, when Obama won, 71% Democrats and 24% Republicans. Now, the Democratic number hasn't changed all that much. It's 72 instead of 71. But in Nevada, for the Republicans, it was 24% support in 2012. Now it's 19. So an even bigger Latino vote in Nevada. And again, with the culinary union doing their best to get the vote out, and with visits to the state by surrogates and Clinton herself, these are going to be banked votes. They're going to be in the bank. And that's why I think Nevada's a very solid Clinton win at this point, probably already done.
Yeah, I'm no expert at Nevada. I read Ralston like everybody else, but what he says makes sense to me.
Well, comparing it to the 2012 numbers makes total sense, and you got to take your hat off to Harry Reid, who built this thing.
Right. And just update polling so you can freak out. Actually, you'd be happy. Clinton within 2 in Georgia, after the other poll had her within 1.
It's going to be a really interesting, I think, very close race in Georgia. I don't see Georgia going blue, but that's one of those scratch your head, you never know. It depends what happens in the next couple of days.
It's interesting about it, and I don't fault them. You don't make a big investment in Georgia if you're a Democrat this year. But if you knew now, I knew then what you knew now, you might have put more into it and maybe stolen it. But I'm with you. I think we fall a little short.
Limited resources, and this is where the ground game comes up. Did you hear my story yesterday about the difference in the Nevada ground game between the Democrats and the Republicans?
Yeah, I was out of pocket mostly yesterday, so I wasn't able to hear anything.
For the Democrats, Clinton goes and does a rally. She sets up the rally directly within walking distance of an early voting station. So after the rally, whether it's her or her surrogates, go walk over there and go vote. Trump does a rally, and he says the buses will come to take you to the polling spot. The buses don't show up, and so he's got 2 vans and about 20 people go. But it's even worse than that. Then they start doing their get out the vote calling, and a lot of the people that they're calling in Nevada, the Republicans, turn out to be Democratic county chairs.
Who've already voted.
And not for the Republican. So their whole get out the vote strategy is a 1990s telephone book.
Right.
That is weird. I'm surprised he even thought to provide buses. I suppose having heard that Clinton was doing it, he said, I better.
But wait. It gets better.
Oh.
So he's going to Nevada to help shore up the vote. And, of course, he'll go to Washoe County and he'll go to Reno, where there's a little bit more of a population center than the rural areas where he's strongest. And Washoe's kind of a bellwether split county, okay? But when is he going? He's going Saturday. He's going the day after the early vote is already done.
Get on the bus, though.
What's wrong with this picture here?
Yeah, Greg, and
it's doing the same thing with North Carolina. I think he's going there after the early vote is already done. It's crazy.
Well, it goes to another point of another media miss in some of the coverage where it says, "Oh, look, she's going to New Hampshire and Pennsylvania
and Michigan. The big one.
And Michigan. Something must be wrong." Yeah, there is something wrong. You don't have a brain in your head, and you're covering politics.
There's no early voting, and so you have to go late in order to gin up to get out the vote that's going to be on Election Day. So this is traditional.
It's the most efficient use of time for a candidate.
Right.
Because you want them to go vote. But if the election booths aren't open, people can't vote.
Let's assume you want to win. I mean, you're not concerned about running up the score. You just want to make sure that you actually win the election. Is it better for her to spend the last couple of days in Pennsylvania and Michigan, or is it better to spend it in Georgia and Arizona, which are, quote, close states, end quote? Why aren't you in North Carolina? You're going to be in Florida, and you're going to be in Ohio, but why aren't you in these other states? Because the work there has already been done. Now she's starting to hit the states where they don't have that early voting stuff that we've been talking about for a week. In other words, they look like they've done this before.
Yes.
Right. Interesting. Shell's memo came out. He's projecting now that by the end of early voting, over 70% of the total vote will have voted. That means the election day vote will only amount to 30% of the vote at this point.
That's pretty good.
That is pretty good. But
that's a record, I think.
Yes, it's a record terrific, by about 7 or 8%.
Huge monkey wrench in the other brilliant Trump ground game, sending poll watchers to watch the last 30%.
Absolutely, I thought about that the other day, and it's interesting. But that's why he said Pennsylvania, though, and of course there was news on that as well, that the judge basically ruled that you can't be a poll watcher outside your precinct. So that's good news. So there won't be roving bands of poll watchers, or at least if they will be, they should be arrested.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not going to push you on a number, Armando, before I think we still pretty feel good about Florida. It's not done. There's a lot of work to do, but Florida is feeling okay to me. North Carolina, I'm having trouble getting a read on.
Let me tell you about Florida. A couple things. First, the official number right now, and it's important because we have 3 more days, and they may be 3 of our biggest days. They should be 3. If they are 3 of our biggest days, Souls to the Polls Day, the big one, is Sunday.
Yep.
All right, and we'll get to see what that is. But right now, the electorate is 68% white, officially, formally. But as Shale notes, and most people know, and I can tell you from personal experience, the Florida, that's one flaw in the voter file, and I don't know how it happens, but some Latinos are listed as white. Myself, my parents, we're not very white. We are white, but you know what I mean. My parents speak broken English. They're not your typical white cracker from, and that's not a pejorative in Florida. That's what they call themselves, or used to anyway. In North Florida, it's not the same white vote. Let's put it that way. But
I have to point out they did not get out of the way of a hurricane.
Huh.
No, but that makes them kind of white crackers. I guess you're right. Okay. That send your email to me. That's not no one else on the show said that. But right now, the early vote looks like at the end of the early vote, we should have somewhere around 65% white. Remember, the turnout in 2012 was 67 to 68% white. So if we get below that before voting day, because it goes down on voting day too, strangely enough, we could have a 65% white electorate, which is incredibly good for Democrats. I'll give you an example. In 2014, when Chris barely lost by about 40,000 votes to Scott, the electorate was 70% white. If we get it down to 65%, I feel that my 5% margin will be correct.
65% would be very impressive.
It would be impressive.
In terms of not the 65, but the 35.
Yes. So, but it comes down to these 3 days. So to get to your question, am I sticking by my 5? If we have great turnout for early voting the next 3 days? Yes. If not, I think 2-3. That's where I land. I do think that, and I will note, Nate Silver says it's a toss-up in Florida, 50-50 basically, by his model. It's not a toss-up. It is not a toss-up.
Any more than Nevada is.
Nevada's not a toss-up, but he doesn't have Nevada as a toss-up for whatever reason. Florida, he has a toss-up, but I can explain why, and I will go into my RCP rant. When you include Republican polls, not independent Republican polls like Rasmussen, which is bad enough, but actual people who work for Republicans, what we would call internal polls, in your average, you've skewed it. It doesn't make sense to do that. But RCP does, and Nate does. And what happens? They flood the zone. Nate throws them all in. He gives them all some weight for whatever reason.
Well, he puts a finger on the scale depending upon where he thinks they belong. Here's an interesting thing, because when you look at his map this morning, sure, he's got 2/3 chance of Clinton winning and 1/3 Trump. But he's got Florida ever so slightly blue. It's 50.7 to 49.3 chance. He's got Nevada somewhat blue, 52 to 48. I think it's more than that. He's got North Carolina blue. He's got 294 electoral votes. You know, his thing isn't about where these states fall, because those are not unreasonable. It's just that, what if the polling is wrong? That's the whole basis of his uncertainty.
Well, if the polling is wrong, then throw the whole thing out. I mean, that actually makes no sense to me.
Then why even do it?
Why even do it?
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm totally with you.
The premise of the model is the polls aren't wrong.
Except his has what if they are wrong built in. And so for whatever reason, that's the way that model looks, and that's why I don't, take it seriously that his is so different than everybody else's. When you actually look at the data, it's really not. It's just that he wants to hedge a little bit. That's his mission.
No, there's obviously more going on than that. I mean, he's 20 points off of everybody else. There's something else going on.
Well, but when you look at the electoral votes and you look at the colors on the map and who is assigned which category, it's 294 to 243, and he's got a 4-point lead in the polls for Clinton with 4 days to go in the election.
Yeah.
Right? So the only thing that he's saying is, well, the margin of error or the uncertainty principle or whatever you want to call it is much bigger this year than other years because there's perhaps semi-viable third and fourth parties who at least are more than 2 points, and because maybe there's more undecideds than usual, and maybe there's less polling, which is true, than there has been in the past, less quality polling.
I don't agree with any of that. And I have to interrupt you in a New York way, because if he believes about uncertainty principle and breaks, he should be using head-to-head polls.
Don't argue with me. Argue with him. I've said all along, I think his model is broken.
It's hilarious because he writes articles that respond to all my bitching about him on Twitter. Like my constant complaint of, well, how can Obama have been a shoe-in? Because he had Obama at this point at 92%.
Right.
Though Clinton has better polls by, maybe a point or two. And so he wrote a long article explaining that.
Well, I don't know if you've seen those posts that he writes, but there's like an invisible link at the bottom on the right-hand corner. It says HTA, which is Hat Tip Armando. You just have to hold it up.
I'm glad he wrote it, though.
You just have to hold it up to the light and tilt your screen in the proper way, and you'll be able to see it.
Well,
anyway,
let
me give you this one last one before I go.
Thing.
Gotta go, so I gotta give you this one last one. This is Latino Decisions, and they have an 11-3, that is to say November 3rd post. Latino electorate on track for historic turnout in 2016, and they figure that overall throughout the country, they're talking about a 3 to 5% increase over 2012 numbers. That's pretty dramatic.
And we have real data that backs that up.
And with that, 79 to 18 going for Clinton.
And let me leave you with a present, Greg, as you leave.
Yeah.
Survey Monkey poll of Arizona, Clinton +1.
So Arizona is a toss-up. And if we win it, it'll be the Latino vote that makes us win. And if
that's actually my surprise pick for the night.
Good for you.
That's my surprise pick for the night.
We'll see what happens. If we win, we'll have to thank people of color, Latinos, women, and college-educated Republican women voters in particular.
Yes. We'll have to go up to people and say, thank you.
Flowers.
Oh, my God. What a freaking nightmare.
Flowers are appropriate.
All right. Wow. Oh, so...
you know who told me that? Jennifer Rubin. Jennifer
Oh.
Rubin tweeted me and said,
Really?
listen, when Clinton wins this election, be sure to thank the college-educated Republican women. You
I will.
thank us.
If they'd vote for her, I would be the first to thank them.
I agree with her.
I want to see it, though. I don't trust white voters. I'm sorry.
I'm not sending the flowers now.
Oh, yeah, right. Don't do it in advance, please.
But if they do that, you know, I'm in with you, Armando.
I am always wary of Republicans who advise me to greet liberators with flowers, though. I must be honest with you about that.
I like to focus on the liberation.
All right.
Listen,
flowers for everybody after that.
Yeah, I just hope white voters aren't lying to us. I know I don't believe in hidden. In my brain, I don't believe in the hidden Trump vote.
They're not registered.
But I'm a little worried. I'm
They're
just
not
slightly
registered.
worried about these college educated not doing what they're saying they're doing. That's it's not a rational fear. There's no reason that didn't happen at all in the primaries. Trump's an underperformer, but I can't say it doesn't. That isn't my one little worry.
Again, I will say to you, having Melania Trump go to Pennsylvania and remind everybody what a bully Trump is.
Oh man, was that unbelievable! I heard you talk about it. You were
You
so
see
right.
that? You see that,
But
David?
she was saying he's not. Or something.
Right.
You're not wrong.
Well,
you were very right on that.
Let's give
one.
us
That
some
was
examples
amazing.
of how we are. I got a great tweet storm, which is too long to do, with Sam Stein going back and finding, it's on my Storify, going back and finding every single Trump bully tweet after she had that speech, and it's about 20 tweets long.
Yeah, that's
Go
all
tell
he
him
does.
about this.
That's why
Did you
he's
know
popular.
about that? Did you know about this? It's amazing.
I can tell you
was
that
amazing.
if he followed her program, he would have lost he'd be out of the primaries in February, March. That was his whole premise, was that he was a bully on Twitter.
Right. Exactly. Anyway, I'll send you the Sam Stein link, but I will leave both of you there. Thanks so much. It's been a great election season. We'll be speaking next after the election,
Yes.
and then we'll take it from there.
You're not talking Monday or Tuesday?
Monday, Tuesday,
Not
no live
live.
show.
No, I won't have a strong enough,
Take care,
dependable
guys.
stream to do that. Thank you very much, Greg. We'll check in
No,
with
that's
you
too bad.
behind the scenes between then and now. Thanks again. I'm taking the kids and we're escaping. We're planning our escape route in case of Trump victory. We're going the wrong direction for our Canadian escape. But I guess we could take a boat, try to get to Bermuda from Myrtle Beach.
Well, listen, I mean, gosh, I hope I don't even want to think about that.
No.
I don't. I mean, I've been calmer, but now that it's closer, I've gotten more nervous. Not about the election, because I think the data. I mean, as I said, my rational thought process makes me feel fairly comfortable. But because the consequence of not winning is Trump,
Right, and also
I'm more scared now than it's merited by the possibility of him winning.
people are also nervous about what will Trump people actually do when they lose? How will they take it? What will their reaction be? I mostly think they're pretty lazy folks.
Me too.
So
I'm less worried about that. I'm more worried about Trump than his people.
yeah, and he'll keep blabbing, no doubt. I know he wants. Of course, he wants to stay relevant. That's his whole life has been a battle to stay relevant. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. I guess watch closely what happens if anybody actually gets up off the couch to go watch a poll somewhere. I have my doubts about a lot of that too. I think the people who do show up outside of their home precincts or counties will largely be people who, though they may have been motivated to do this by Trump, are sort of out of his main core constituency, or people who have their own organizations driving this, Oath Keepers and I guess Klansmen if they're willing to show up someplace, but people who have certainly aligned themselves with him, but who have their own outside organizing capabilities, such as they are. The idea of your average Trump voter taking the day off from work to go, monitor people he's basically afraid of at his core is hard to believe.
Yeah,
So I'm not too worried.
again, I guess there's good reason to be concerned about that for whatever reason. My concern is Trump himself in the office of the presidency. It's unthinkable.
That's nuts.
You know, if we win, I'm going to do a postmortem myself on the media's role in enabling this monster, and I use that word on purpose because he's a monster. He's a monster as a person. In his personal life, in his business life, he is a monster. And the idea of him having control over us as president of the United States, in the sense of, you know, having the most influence on our lives, on our economy, on our finances, on our national security, is so unthinkable that, you know, people like Jeff Zucker should be, put up in a stock like they used to do back in the old days and let people throw tomatoes at him. But that's for another day, day after next Tuesday, when we hopefully win. And I'll say, you know, I'm a pretty strong Hillary Clinton supporter on her merits. But I can tell you, on a percentage basis, my commitment to fighting in this election is 80% about Trump and 20% about supporting her. It really is.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure a lot of people actually feel that way. Even as you said, people who are Hillary supporters on the merits. I mean, he's that bad.
He's unthinkable. It's unthinkable. It's a disgrace to our country that we're even where we are. If he somehow won, we always joke about leaving the country, but it's not as big a joke, is it?
No. And even, I mean, all by himself, he'd be that disastrous that I'd certainly want to be. I'd certainly want to think about being elsewhere. Though my first response to that usually is to say, no, this is my country. I'm going to stay here and fight to push you out. You can't take it from me. But I will say that there's a the new concern, of course, is I guess, and I say new, meaning it has been the case throughout his run for the presidency. So it's not new in that sense, but it's new in the sense that I'm more worried about the supporters than the candidate and their policies, in the sense that Trump's racism and misogyny, I just think he's sort of run-of-the-mill, old, privileged white man, racist and misogynist. That is to say, not the absolute worst that I've ever seen. It's just that there are people who are, Klansmen and vicious, weirdo, alt-right, as they like to call themselves, anti-Semites, and they're all enabled by him. I don't really ever envision Donald Trump, walking into walking down the street and shouting about how he wants to gas Jews. I don't think he's going to say things like that. I don't even think he believes that in anywhere, and not even an inkling of it, I don't think, in him normally. But the fact that he won't say, oh my God, you can't say that, and if you do, I don't want anything to do with you, to people who do say that, that's the more troubling. And a bigger fear for me is what people do with the validation of Trump. Even if he loses at this point, it's too late. He's already been validated in ways that make it possible for people to, think the interesting thing, I guess, would be is if the shock value of what the people in the alt-right like to do diminishes because it becomes mainstreamed and they lose their fervor for anti-Semitism, racism, and misogyny. I wonder if that could possibly happen. It's no longer cool. These are like hipster racists, generally speaking. And if it's no longer shocking, it doesn't shock everybody's conscience to get online and send cartoons of people being gassed in gas chambers, then they may lose their interest in it. I don't know. But I'm not certain about that. But I'm more worried about what people do certainly with the Trump win and even with the Trump loss. I'm worried about how they take it out on people, about the fact that they learned that there's really no consequences whatsoever to openly displaying these kinds of thoughts, and they're proud to do so, and no one has brought any punishment down on them, and so I can't see why they would think there's a downside, even if Trump loses. I think they know in their heart that he was going to, but nobody has ever come for them. So what the hell? Let's just keep doing this. Maybe next time we'll get a more polished anti-Semite and misogynist.
Well, we had them before. Look,
Yeah.
I mean, the anti-Semitism is unbelievable because it really hasn't been. I don't think. Maybe not being Jewish, maybe I haven't been as attuned to it. But I never thought of the Republican core message as being, overtly anti-Semitism. I always thought it was at best a fringe part
Yes.
of them. John Birchie's part of it.
There was always, there actually used to be more, I thought.
Back in the old days. Yeah.
Yeah, but not
Through
even
the
so
60s,
old.
definitely.
60s, 70s, even into the 80s. I mean, the thing that has astonished me in the last couple of years, pre-Trump, and it's also astonishing that some strain of it continues with Trump, the conservative Republican fervor for Israel, which, I mean, it used to be, it wasn't that long ago, right into the 80s and through George H.W. Bush's administration, the default Republican position on the only issues that even touched the question of anti-Semitism in the most remote way was Israel policy. And the default Israel policy was opposition to loan guarantees. And it was mostly because, guarantee loans to Israel. You mean that Jewish place? Really,
Yeah.
Jews? Are you serious? And that was the default position. And then somewhere along the line, somebody managed to flip the script, and I guess it was terrorism that did it, and 9/11 freaking everybody out and waking up to the idea, at the very least, that fear of Islamic terrorism was going to be a very powerful negative organizing force in the United States. And then all of a sudden, I guess that sort of somehow merged with kooky, fringy dominionism to become this bizarre profession of love for Israel at every opportunity. And that was as weird and uncomfortable a decade as I've ever spent.
Yeah.
But at
Indeed.
least it was not supposed to, that you're supposed to do everything you could to hide your anti-Semitism, even though I think it probably still existed below the surface. No, look, I have an Israeli flag in my office. I love Israel. Can't wait for it to be destroyed in a nuclear
In the end
conflagration.
days.
Yeah. But this enormous display of crazy, weird, death wish love for Israel. But then that fell apart pretty quickly, which suggests, I think that we were, at least other people who believe this too, we were all right that it was an act from start to finish. And like we said, the reason they loved Israel was they needed to have it around to destroy it and kill all the Jewish people in it. But not because we're anti-Semites, but because we're pro-Christian. We're so pro-Christian that we want to kill everybody. Really? All right. Well, yeah. But you can't justifiably label that anti-Semitism. It's not that they're Jewish that we want to kill them. It's just that they're not Christian. See?
Right.
Ah.
Let me tie your, very valid concerns about the Trump supporters and what's going on in terms, not all of them, of course, the
Only half.
violence issue. Normally,
Right.
certainly the 60s, we thought of the FBI as being good guys in the fight against that.
Yes.
But what do we know about the FBI now that gives us any confidence that they'll be an effective institution for investigating and prosecuting this type of thing?
Yeah, I don't know. This has been a terrible 3 days or thereabouts for the FBI. The FBI, I mean, really has seen its prestige fall through the floor in the last couple of days, and I guess with good reason. And it's still very difficult for me to think of things in these terms, just like I'm still weirded out by the idea of talking about Russian interference in the election because, God, that seems so archaic an idea. Oh, my God, the cloak and dagger Russians are behind everything, and you can't prove it because it's espionage and they're trying to cover their tracks. It just seems ridiculous. It's the same thing, the idea of the FBI is trying to plant evidence of this or that. I have difficulty considering it, but I guess I have to.
I've lost a lot of difficulty in expecting anything from the FBI. We always suspected, but we always thought there was enough professionals and principled people that the crazies in the operation, which always existed. Look,
yeah,
there's nobody crazier than James Kallstrom, who you've heard about, right?
Yes, right. In the last day
he's a former head of the New York office, very close to Giuliani, big Trump supporter.
Yes.
Staffed that place, very close to the New York office of the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And, the guy is insane. Literally insane. I mean, he's like the General Flynn of the FBI.
Yeah. Although I was going to let me add that I guess alongside the old school reputation of the FBI, there always was, even in those days, the common story that, but there's also one guy at the FBI who's usually, by the way, ironically enough, the first out of the box with the theory that the Russians were secretly doing it.
Right.
But there's always been even when we revered the FBI, it was clear that there was the one buzz-cut, sunglassed guy who just always was sure that the Russians were pulling some kind of thing and they were going to, just around the corner from assassinating the entire American leadership, but I'm going to stop them by arresting, Martin Luther King somehow.
Yes. I mean, that's absolutely true. And I know Chris Cillizza was raked over the coals for his, presentation as if the FBI had this pristine history, which it absolutely does not. But I do think that the period after Hoover, there was a belief, a view at least, that the FBI had professionalized itself a bit. It had become less of a just a device for J. Edgar Hoover to blackmail people.
Yeah.
And so that reputation, I think, is gone. And I would ask this question of you because that was sort of my segue. If knock on wood, if we're lucky enough to hold on and win this election, something's got to be done about the FBI.
Somebody has to have a look at it, and this, I guess, would be another call for you to make sure that you're voting all the way down ballot, because you know what's going to be done about the FBI if Democrats don't hold
the Senate
at the very least, and frankly, both houses of Congress. Nothing. Yeah,
but I have the feeling that if we can win the Senate, maybe they have one of those blue ribbon commissions to look into the FBI or something.
Yeah, full of FBI people.
Well, I mean, at least some of them, they'll they always come out with a report and then they'll have these recommendations and whatnot. Look, there should be 8 million investigations of these illegal leaks by the FBI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who investigates the FBI, though, is the question.
Yeah, well, we have trouble with that. I know we have an answer. Actually, we were given the answer. We've always had it, but we should thank Donald Trump for reminding us just a few weeks ago. Special prosecutor. You're right. That's right.
If that makes him feel better, I want a special prosecutor, a special commission, whatever.
Idea of, I think he floated special prosecutor for about a day, and then he just went to, I'm just going to throw her right in jail myself.
Yes.
So, okay, we'll slow things down. We're taking the moderate position here. Special prosecutor. Definitely, that's the only answer, how you investigate the FBI. That's it. It's your only option. I mean,
where do you get your investigators from? Who gives them subpoena powers? That's sort of
we'll borrow them from Russia. I don't know.
Let's have the CIA investigate them.
Oh,
right?
I know. I can test all your loyalties. I'll bring Israeli intelligence in.
There we go.
How do you like that?
I like it.
Yeah,
I
know a lot of listeners
we're joking, but it's a serious
just
problem.
vomited, but yeah.
I mean, they've interfered. They've
know if
interfered with a presidential election.
Yeah, I would venture to guess. By the way, Israeli intelligence would be worse. Thank you very much. But that would be an interesting. I only said it to troll the Republican right.
Well, if you tweet that out, that'll be hilarious because they're gonna go nuts on you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about how much that they're giving over to. They've got no standing to complain. How close they've gotten to Russia. Again, I have to. I'm just. My stomach is turning. Saying
they have. I mean,
but yes.
It's an enemy of my enemy thing. But the reality is Trump is not. Trump is the friend of Russia, friend of Putin. And by the way, being a friend of Russia in and of itself, as an ally in the foreign world, if you find common interests, of course, that's what you do. But Putin is Putin. Come on.
Yes, you should draw a line between Russia and Putin.
But he runs Russia, and he runs it with an iron fist. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have popular support in Russia, but it's easier to maintain popular support when you throw all your opponents in jail.
Yes. And, of course, he's already begun promising to do that.
Yeah.
Not the rest of you, but I don't know what's left. I mean, if you can just, by fiat, toss Hillary Clinton in jail, I don't know why he wouldn't also want the voter files and say, you're all responsible for this.
Nixon wanted people audited. It wouldn't surprise me if, look, Trump's crazy. And he's crazy, he's stupid, and he's evil. And I mean that. He's evil.
Yes. Fat, drunk, and stupid. There's one guy.
He's not some just innocent, fun-loving guy. He's a bad person.
Yes. I agree. No doubt about that.
I mean, I know you agree because you more than anyone have focused on. I think. Tell me if I misread you, but you really think he is an honest to goodness sexual predator.
Yes, absolutely, and I think he's not just that he's admitted it. I think he probably, if you had released those tapes in another context, or if they had been released, say for some reason, 2 years ago before he decides to run for president, I think he's smart enough, I guess. In quotes, air quotes, smart enough to realize running for president, I think most people want me to disavow this, but how absent a run for president, I don't think he's willing to disavow the Billy Bush tapes. Oh, yeah. What can I tell you? I love women. And that would be enough for him. I love women. No, you don't. You hate women. No, I love them. I love grabbing them. That's why I grab them. I love them so much. No, now you're confusing what you want to do with them and getting your way, which is something you love, with loving / as we understand it, respecting women. I mean, I don't think he thinks that there was anything wrong with that. That's why he said it's locker room talk. He didn't say it's locker room talk and people should stop talking like this in locker rooms. He said, the reason I did it is because it's okay as locker room talk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think he thought he did anything wrong.
No. Not by saying so, and even if he, of course, I suppose he might have then said, well, it was just talk. I don't actually do that to people, except that nobody talks like that in locker rooms. But then, of course, I don't know, you get a parade of women who say, yeah, he does do that. And, I mean, there's too much evidence piled up that, yeah, he does that. And he, in addition to which, he goes out of his way to give himself opportunities to do it more. Who buys beauty pageants? No, what's the market for beauty pageants? No, if somebody wants to start a beauty pageant, they think it's a way to make money, fine. They go and they do it. Who buys them off of other people? I'll take over now. I just want the profit enterprise of buying a beauty pageant. How much is a beauty pageant?
TV networks like products, and you could see why they would invest in that type of thing.
Beauty pageants because they want to be the ones to air them. They don't want to have to negotiate for the television rights, so they know they have it and they can sell ads on it. Fine, great. The owner of a beauty I mean, I guess maybe he could claim a cut of advertising revenues from a network.
It's not a particularly lucrative business. No. Let's put it that way. He's not doing it for the money because there's not much money in running a beauty pageant or running 5 in a year. I mean, what do you make? $1 million, $5 million? If you're a busy man, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason it makes any sense for him is because he's not really as rich as he says he is, and there's probably a lot of cash that changes hands in lump sums, and he loves businesses that do things like that.
That's true.
As opposed to just an ongoing concern that makes money slowly over time and you can use and borrow against or whatever. But buying 3 beauty pageants, buying a modeling agency, it doesn't make any damn sense. It just because he loves doing these things. Why have even just other dumb lifestyle things? There's certainly no money in having a launch party for a condo. It doesn't. I don't think they've ever sold any more units because of it. It's obviously a net loss. They waste lots of money on those launch parties, and nobody who goes. I mean, nobody. Yeah, his friends go, but he only does those things because that's an opportunity to call upon his stable of women that he keeps in the beauty pageant and modeling world to bring them to these parties. So he and his potential customers and friends can grope them. That's what he does. You bet. Absolutely, I believe that.
That's a very, very reasonable view of it, which is sad. But it is. And I didn't mean sad ironically. It's genuinely sad that this man might be president. It's a sad commentary on our country. Yeah. I mean, that's just the truth. I mean, again, after Tuesday, we'll have to relive this experience if God willing, everything. And for the next 4 days, I believe in God. In case you were wondering.
Yeah, just to be safe.
Just to be safe. We really need to revisit how in the hell this happened.
Yeah. Well. There will be lots of books written, hot takes, which suck, written, and good ones too. And we'll be reviewing them. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just because it's such great radio material. I don't really intend to give it up either. To be honest, even if he goes away.
I think it needs a deep exploration. How did this happen? Again, God willing, and we win. God forbid we lose. Jesus, I don't. All right. I'm not thinking about that right now.
Well, put this aside. Go do the work, and we'll see what we can see if we can make the plan work. Execute the plan. The plan should work.
Right. Let's execute the plan. Fine. Let's win, and then we can spend a year rehashing how in the hell Trump happened.
Yeah, and we're going to end up having to do it too because the media will say, "Hey, he's no longer an issue," and they'll drop it, and there'll be no investigations into. So I mean, there's a lot of work to do to uncover what the truth is behind some things that are still only exist at the level of allegations, and all of the impetus for that goes away when you defeat him. And of course, now even if it stayed, even if we were now interested in investigating these things, who knows whether we trust the people doing investigating anymore? I don't know, but it's one of the most disappointing things about. The worst stories that come up during an election is you never really end up getting to the bottom of them if you just defeat the guy and get rid of him. But I always wished, why don't we know more about this? Why didn't we finish this investigation? Why did, Iran-Contra go away? How come we gave up on that? Why wouldn't we want to know what happened in that? It's no longer relevant. It's always relevant.
It's always relevant, more so than ever. And this isn't just government questions. This is, or even Republican Party questions. This is societal questions. Mm-hmm. The media in particular needs to. I mean, I think Jeff Zucker's one of the villains of this election. I really do.
Yeah, well, you've made that clear, and I think it's clearly true. And what we do about it,
Fox is Fox.
Yes.
I didn't expect anything else from Fox. I don't know if anybody else did. In fact, in some ways, Fox surprised me. Megyn Kelly actually went out a little bit of her way to really get after Trump.
By the way.
Chris Wallace was pretty fair in the third debate. They fired Roger Ailes. Those are 3 surprising things to me.
Yes. Speaking of which, Megyn Kelly's memoir, I guess, I don't know if it's out or just leaking now. So Vanity Fair has, she's very clear and says it in no uncertain terms. Megyn Kelly says Roger Ailes absolutely just flatly told her, in exchange for sex, I can advance your career. Oh,
Amazing.
Gee, she's still there. I mean,
Yeah.
he's gone, but I mean, and she comes out of this, several steps ahead of where she was. Oh, he did help her career. There you go. Well done.
Yeah, no, she
got the help
She
without
destroyed
the sex.
Ailes,
Great job.
and she is now, in the driver's seat because her contract's up, and she can go anywhere she wants. It would be interesting to see how Megyn Kelly.
Rupert Murdoch should give her the network.
Well, they're going to, I think. I mean, that's one of the things.
Not a new contract. She should be head of the network.
Well, I think
He
effectively
does
she
very
she's-
well with that. I think
she
he would
is.
look great.
And it's just a question of what she wants to do with it. I mean,
I
who is
don't
she
know.
really is going to be an interesting question.
Yes, I don't know. I am not a Megyn Kelly fan. No,
I'm
glad
not
she said
a
this, but
particular
so what?
fan. But
Yeah.
I recognize her talent at the television thing. She's good at that. There's no question.
Okay.
And who she wants to be after this election, after all this is if you're interested in that TV stuff, is kind of an interesting question.
Yes.
Because Fox has some issues to decide. But of course, all that's predicated on Trump losing. Because if Trump wins, we know what they're going to be. They are going to support Trump in every way possible.
Yeah, and it wasn't 100% clear at the beginning either. They were a little reluctant. I don't know why that was.
I think that's true. I think they eventually just saw it as when their audience was revolting on them, and they pulled it back. But that's something to watch. Anyway, you've got 30 minutes of airtime till the election. I know you probably have things that you want to talk about. I just thank you for letting me put in my final thoughts.
Sure, it's an emotional time. We all need to be able to do this. I appreciate it, and I've got more I want to get to, and I think I'm just going to record it in bits and pieces along the way over the weekend so that there's new material for Monday and Tuesday, although it's hard to know what's going to be hot material. This weekend could turn everything upside down.
I will send you things that you might want to talk about.
Sure.
I don't know if you want to talk about the latest results in Florida. I could send you a short report on that if you want.
Certainly. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
All right, Dave.
All right.
Have a great trip to South Carolina, but make sure you vote before you leave.
Okay. Yes. All right. We
right.
can do that.
Take care.
Oh, you know what? All right. Thanks very much, Armando. I'm also taking care of some housekeeping on the side here, communicating with Josie about her appearance on the show. Although I have two contradictory emails here. One that said, "Hey, how about if I come by at 10:40?" Although then, let's see, it of course being close to the election for her too, because the election is at the same time. She says she's actually quite swamped, if not urgent. Maybe we can talk about post-election issues. Although, well, I will say this. Let me relieve her of the stress of this. If she's swamped, that I don't want to take her away from important work. But I was kind of looking forward to some more discussion of what we should be doing with some of the prosecutorial contests around the country. We've certainly got a great flavor for what is going on and what you ought to be doing in Harris County, Texas, and in Arizona as well. But look, if there's important work that needs to be done in the last few days before the election, take care of that, Josie. Make sure the election is won, and we'll do a postmortem. That's fine. And in the meantime, I recommend that everybody check your Twitter feed, check the writing you've been doing on Daily Kos and elsewhere, so that you can stay informed. I guess with time running short, it's incumbent on all of us to do our own homework, I guess. Okay, so let's see. How can we take care of both these things at the same time? I should have had Armando stay on for another minute and just pontificate for a moment so I can communicate with Josie here. Okay. At any rate, well, if she manages to find the time to squeak in and get a final report in, terrific. If not, I can certainly understand it. It's a busy time for everyone, and anybody who's got a handle on the information she's got, if she's distributing it to people who need it and can do things with it in the election more effectively than communicating it here, that is okay by me. No pressure. It's supposed to be a fun thing too, Josie. You're supposed to look forward to coming by, and on some days you just can't, and that's cool. We don't mind. We miss you, but we let you go. Okay. And we'll check in again post-election if that's the way it works out best. In the meantime, then, let me turn to this. What I didn't get to, and I didn't squeeze that at anybody, and because everybody got nervous at the end, and I don't blame them because I hate doing predictions. I don't think we got solid predictions, say, on electoral vote count or which states. We got a few predictions about states. But I did get, because he heard Greg discussing the possibility of predictions, our friend listening in Norway, Bjorn has sent us his Facebook post on his predictions on the campaign and how would it look if the Norwegian fellow were to put you to shame, Americans. Let's find out. He's got it right there on his Facebook page, and by the way, he's Bjorn Olav Megard if you're looking for him online, and we'll include a link to his prediction. We'll just put this one out there because it's a bold one. His prediction from mid-June, and he says he's sticking to it. What's the prediction? Clinton wins, yes. 6 percentage points. Wow. 347 electoral votes to 191 for Trump. Obama's 2012 states plus North Carolina, essentially, is how it comes down. By the way, he credits Dan Pfeiffer and the June. Did he have a June podcast in which he made the same prediction? I guess that's it. Basically, he's signing on with Dan Pfeiffer on that one. Leaving it in public, he says, for people to spite me if I am dead wrong. Remember, he says elections should be understood mostly as data and math problem, not journalists analyzing the election as if it were a play, script, or a novel. The map is here. It goes about like this. Oh, the reasoning, by the way, is laid out here. Clinton beats the polls by 2 to 2.5 percentage points due to superior ground game, GOTV, and a few shy women Clinton voters married to Trump voting men. Ooh, I think that's a good call. Slimmest margins in the red states. He has Arizona staying red by the slimmest of margins. Georgia and Missouri doing the same. Slimmest margin in the blue states. A blue Iowa he's got, as well as a slim victory in Ohio and Nevada. Very interesting. So it comes down about like you'd expect. Coastal blue, with the exception of South Carolina and Georgia. Solid West Coast blue. And, the Northeast Midwest region blue, from Wisconsin over to Maine down to North Carolina, with the only interruption in the northern tier of that. And they're not really northern tier, but because they then border the Great Lakes, we'll say Indiana, basically. So Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, skip over Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and then down the line from the top, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina. A little bit of a hole in there with West Virginia, sneaking in the Appalachian protrusion there. And then red in the middle, with the exception of Colorado and New Mexico going blue. Florida, by the way, also coming in the blue column. And then the vast sea of red that puzzles all the people who live out there. How come we don't win when there's this vast sea of red? And the answer is because you can't see another house from your house. So that's the reason. All right. Well, thanks very much for sharing that with us, Bjorn. I know that you probably were disappointed in not hearing us put numbers to it. I hate doing things like that because I hate to be wrong. That's a problem for me. I don't know. Well, 347 is super aggressive in the electoral vote count. It would be fantastic. I would love it. I'd love to see over 300, but I'm getting nervous and think it will come in slightly under. But it would be fantastic. My hope has always been for 300 plus. Hell, I'd love to see, I'd love to see it be a wipeout. I'm surprised that it's possible for him to win any states at all, given how horrible a person he is. But I understand the dynamics. So I don't know. I can't say I predict anything. I leave it to other people. I focus on other aspects of the race, specifically how terrible that one particular candidate is. Okay, let's see. there are, of course, other stories. What else have I got open that came through today that definitely demanded some particular... Oh, here's Armando says, if you need numbers from me, I don't demand it. But he's got a 50-45 election. I guess 3 Johnson, 1 Stein. Is that it? 50, 45, 3-1. 322 electoral votes for Clinton. That's certainly a possibility. And I guess one of the things about picking an over-under around 300 is there's so many states that have gigantic chunks of electoral votes. And everybody's got, it's very few states that are small enough to really get you only just barely over the 300 point. So, you either fall just short and be like 290 something, or you go way over like 320 something. You can put together any combination you want, obviously. It's just that they're not all that likely. They're not all equally likely to go either way. So, anyway, man, I don't know. I have no prediction for you because I never sit down and pick the states I think everybody's going to win and then add it up. So I could pick a number out of a hat and say, do it like The Price is Right. Of course, if it was The Price is Right, I would say 1 electoral vote. And then I'd be the closest without going over. But that's not likely to happen. Okay, the prediction game, anybody who wanted to weigh in with those is free to do so, and I'll happily repeat yours. I just won't be able to give you mine. Okay. Let's see. Other important... Well, the most important story that we actually had a request for so far would be the Eichenwald story. And we might as well close out the day with that one. The question purported to be answered in this, why Vladimir Putin's Russia is backing Donald Trump. And it's a big question mark, and there's going to be some auto-playing video, and I'm going to have to find a way to kill it.
Also discusses
no, that didn't kill it. That unkilled it. All right. And it'll address another question which listeners have certainly asked about. And I just saw recently somebody say, a tweet that that's the part that's most puzzling to me is why the FBI would be full of crazies here. Karen D, who is, you can find under the handle of, I've never figured out what the terminology is for that name which you would enter, which is not your actual Twitter address, but that sometimes people just use the same thing. Where I put my name, David Waldman, that's me. She identifies as Karen D. I say my Twitter handle, KagroX. Hers is Kare, as in Karen, but without the N, and then SF, Kare, SF. Karen says, here's where I don't get the FBI crazies. You'd think they understand the Putin-Trump nexus. How do they end up then supporting Trump? And I really don't know. It's amazing that they are able to throw over decades of Cold War fears of Russia and feelings about Russia and what we believe they're behind and what their motivations are, despite the fact that they have, more or less anyway, overthrown their communist organizing principle. Anyway, let's take a look at Eichenwald's piece here. Why would Putin's Russia be backing Donald Trump? Let's see what he's got to say on the subject, although the screen keeps jumping. In phone calls, meetings, and cables, America's European allies have expressed alarm to one another about Donald Trump's public statements denying Moscow's role in cyber attacks designed to interfere with the U.S. election. They fear the Republican nominee for president has emboldened the Kremlin in its unprecedented cyber campaign to disrupt elections in multiple countries in hopes of weakening Western alliances, according to intelligence, law enforcement, and other government officials in the United States and Europe. While American intelligence officers have privately briefed Trump about Russia's attempts to influence the U.S. election, he has publicly dismissed that information as unreliable, instead saying this hacking of incredible sophistication and technical complexity could have been done by some 400-pound guy sitting on their bed, or even a child. His child is pretty good at the cyber, right? Officials from 2 European countries tell Newsweek that Trump's comments about Russia's hacking have alarmed several NATO partners because it suggests he either does not believe the information he receives in intelligence briefings, and that's troublesome, I'm sure, to them, does not pay attention to it, does not understand it, or is misleading the American public for unknown reasons. One British official says members of that government, who are aware of the scope of Russia's cyber attacks both in Western Europe and America, found Trump's comments quite disturbing because they fear that if elected, the Republican presidential nominee would continue to ignore information gathered by intelligence services in the formulation of U.S. foreign policy. Trump's behavior, however, has at times concerned the Russians, leading them to revise their hacking and disinformation strategy. For example, when Trump launched into an inexplicable attack on the parents of a Muslim American soldier who died in combat, the Kremlin assumed the Republican nominee was showing himself psychologically unfit to be president and would be forced by his party to withdraw from the race. Look, I'm going to interrupt here at this point because Josie is calling in. Hi, Josie. How you doing?
Hi, good. How are you?
Okay. I heard that you were a bit swamped pre-election.
Yes.
But, I'd certainly be happy to just pause and talk to you for a couple minutes about it. If you're under a crush of work.
I just, emails can take way more time than you want them to. So I'm just warning everybody on email, but I'm here for the morning.
Okay. No problem. That's terrific. Let's see, how can we, make the best use of your time? Do you want to continue with the stories of some of the prosecutorial races around the country? Is there something else you think?
Sure. Let's talk about, talk about another race.
Okay, yes.
So I talked, for the past couple of weeks, I think I talked about Bill Montgomery in Maricopa County, a terrible guy. I talked about Devin Anderson in Harris County. She's terrible. But I thought I'd talk to you for a second about Mark Ober, who is in Hillsborough County, which is Tampa, the Tampa area. We'll see what happens on Tuesday. I was feeling a lot more positive about winning some of these races. Now I'm feeling less sure as these poll numbers are kind of shifting. But I still am holding out hope. And it feels like there are a couple of stories about Mark Ober that are worth telling. And one of them I wrote about yesterday, which is that a story about Mark Ober and Walmart. So, that's always a good way to start a political story.
Walmart always raises eyebrows.
Right, exactly. Mark Ober, there was a woman who was 57 years old, a disabled mother who lives in Tampa, and went to Walmart. This was about 2 years ago. She's walking around Walmart and she is picking up medicine for her dog and she sees some flea medicine. And she picks it up and she realizes it's the wrong flea medicine, puts it back, keeps moving, checks out, goes outside, and two men accost her. They grab her, they throw her down to the ground, and they accuse her of shoplifting. And and right next to her is the flea medicine, $29 flea medicine. And she thinks, this didn't happen. I didn't steal this. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what happened. Well, the two men who both worked at the store, one of them was a security guard / floor walker, someone who kind of follows people around to see if they're shoplifting.
Yeah.
And that guy, didn't really realize there were cameras around the Walmart, and he had basically set up this elaborate, frame where he, he was following her around. He saw her look at the flea medicine. He saw her put it back. He picked it up. He opened it up. He took out some of the packets of it. And then he went outside and he put them under a bench outside the Walmart. And then he waited for her to come outside, and then he accosted her and dragged her over to the bench and said, they found these on her. Now, obviously that's the kind of story that it's very hard to believe, right? You're thinking oh yeah, sure they did this. If someone told me, I got arrested for shoplifting, but actually the security guard framed me, I would think they were a little,
I could see
disingenuous, I think. Or it's hard to believe.
Yes.
You'd just not be sure. But there's video of the security guard doing all these things. Literally video of it. I mean, full video proving she's framed. So the woman says she didn't do anything wrong. Walmart ends up calling the police and having her arrested, which in itself is kind of a weird choice. You know, a lot of times when people shoplift a store, will just say, don't come back here unless it's a lot of money. It's weird that they called the police over $29, but they did. The police have her arrested and she's charged with shoplifting.
Okay.
This is the point at which a prosecutor should have reviewed the evidence and dropped the charges. Yeah. This is such a ridiculous case, right? They have the video evidence. They can see exactly what happened. They know she's not guilty. There's no reason to go forward with this case. Unless, which is my theory and is not proven, so I want to give that disclaimer, but it's the theory of many other people too, which is that unless Walmart pressures you to prosecute. For Walmart, you know, this didn't look great. This was one of their employees. This is full-on assault, framing. It was the guy's first day on the job as a security guard. So Walmart was kind of trying to play chicken with this woman to force criminal charges to kind of keep her from filing civil charges. So my guess is, and I don't know this for sure, but my guess is that they offered her a couple plea deals that would have said, you can't file civil charges if you take this deal. Or, you know, you can't hold Walmart accountable if you take this deal. But she refused to take a deal. She said, I'm not guilty and I will go to trial on this. So this took 10 months of taxpayer dollars, 10 months of trial prep, 10 months of this woman being humiliated, 10 months of going through all the steps, getting to trial. She goes through the trial, they see the video evidence, the jury, and they take less than 1 minute to find her not guilty when they go back to do jury deliberations. Less than 60 seconds.
Wow. Okay, well, that's what you would think would happen if there's a video of you not doing this.
Right, exactly. So, she's now suing Walmart, and I think that this case will be getting a lot more attention in the near future. The point of this is that a good prosecutor would never have prosecuted that case. They would have never taken that case to trial. That wouldn't be how they spend their limited resources. It wouldn't be how you find justice. It wouldn't be how you create safety in community. It's not how you take care of victims. But a lot of times prosecutors are driven by stuff that we don't see. And I think in this case they were driven by wanting to keep a good relationship with the local, the national Walmart. And that's really complicated. So Mark Ober is a Republican. He's asked for the death penalty more than almost any other prosecutor in the nation. He has fought to his county, Hillsborough County, which again is Tampa, was the very last Florida county to permit underage marijuana possession to be charged as a civil citation instead of a crime. He's been pretty terrible on rape and sexual assault cases, and many victims have complained that he doesn't follow up with their cases unless they kind of force him and push him. His county has over 500 untested rape kits. But meanwhile, domestic violence homicides have nearly doubled in his county between 2014 and 2015. There's obviously some stuff going on in Hillsborough, right? That needs attention. There's some real problems there. And yet he spent 10 months prosecuting a 57-year-old disabled mother, for shoplifting when he had video within the hour of the incident demonstrating that she had been framed.
Well, certainly something is happening, and it's almost as difficult to believe. Just as you were saying, it's very often difficult to believe somebody's story like this. Sure, they framed you, just like in the movies, but it's also difficult to believe, certainly it's impossible to believe that there isn't something hidden going on here. There's got to be a reason, and it's probably not a very good one. But maybe it is. Maybe it's a fantastic reason, but you would bring that forward if it were the case. yeah, that seems pretty insane, especially to have put 10 months into it. And the jury took a minute, a literal minute. I've never heard of that.
Literal minute.
I mean, everything is, this whole show is premised on the idea that everything is nuanced. Even if it's going to take you 15 minutes, that's open and shut. 1 minute is like, you should never have been here, and probably you should be sanctioned for wasting our time.
Right.
Wow.
Exactly. So, this is kind of a pattern of just inconsistent behavior you see from the DA's office there, where crimes that deserve real attention are getting ignored and crimes that don't deserve real attention are getting an inordinate amount of it. Mark Ober has also been pretty terrible with charging cops, right? And so we often talk about charging cops in unarmed shootings, which is important, obviously, but there's a lot of other behavior that happens where cops can be held responsible that Mark Ober has not done a great job of doing that. There was a case of road rage where an off-duty deputy and a civilian got into kind of a fight. And at some point, the deputy pulled his gun and he points it at the civilian, and he lowers it a few moments later. But that's the sort of thing that Mark Ober would generally charge someone with aggravated assault and battery. That's the history of his office. It's been, you pull out a gun on someone, obviously in the middle of the road, other people are around, you threaten them that way, you are at risk of aggravated assault and battery. And he didn't do it when I was a cop. And it was kind of a big issue because you see this a lot in prosecutors' offices. It really stands out when you're a very, very tough on crime prosecutor and you're putting people in prison for small things. Yeah. It really stands out when you don't charge someone who maybe is your friend or a friend of a friend or works in the same area as you or is also law enforcement. It demonstrates such hypocrisy. It demonstrates such hypocrisy. So that's another thing about Mark Ober. I would also mention another sort of unrelated to elections, something that's happening on Monday that I think people might be interested in.
Okay.
So I went a couple of nights ago and saw the pre-show of a documentary that's coming on BET on Monday night at 9 p.m., which is a weird time. I don't know if you guys know, but Tuesday is a big day.
Yeah. Okay.
So our heads might not be in the documentary watching mode, but it is an hour, and it is called Charged, and it's called Charged: The DA versus Black America. I thought it was really, really, really good. If you are not totally familiar with prosecutors, what they do and the effect that they have on people, it's a really great example and kind of short explainer of what a prosecutor does and kind of the impact they have. It looks at 3 cities, Baltimore, Milwaukee, and New Orleans, and a couple of different cases, and how those different cases play out in different cities. So in Milwaukee, there's a pretty good prosecutor there, especially compared to the god-awful sheriff, who's just awful. But the prosecutor there has kind of created programs and second chance programs and diversion programs and really given people a chance to kind of address issues that may be plaguing them, that may be causing low-level criminal involvement. So, when you're caught, when you're a high school kid and you have weed on you, or, the small things that may happen, he's kind of created programs for those. And it really demonstrates how, for one guy who got involved with the system, but has 4 kids, if he was in a different place, he'd be in prison right now. For maybe a long time, because he was caught with weed twice or 3 times, I think it was, over a 10-year period. But he's in Milwaukee and he gets to both be a dad to his kids and go to a program and get kind of an opportunity. And then it shows how in New Orleans, there is a guy who has 5 kids who, like so many, today, got prescribed painkillers about 10 years ago, and it turned into addiction. It turned into a heroin addiction. That's really common. I know I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know there. I personally have probably a dozen people I know from high school who, over the years since I graduated, have that exact same thing has happened, and they've overdosed and died, and that is not uncommon across America right now. But in New Orleans, that gets you 10 years in prison. That doesn't get you rehab. That doesn't get you help. That gets you 10 years in prison.
Yeah.
And I think this is a great documentary for people to watch if they're interested, because you kind of come away thinking, like, why? Like, what's the point of doing this to someone? How does it help them? How does it help public safety? What's the best way to make sure that people with addictions get help? What's the best way to make sure that people get second chances? What's the best thing for us as a society, as a community, as a country? So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Well, I think that's a great way to, it is a bit of an odd time, and it's certainly a little bit busy, but for a lot of people, the night before the election, that might not be bad timing. From 9 to 10, you watch this. From 10, before you go to bed, Google who's on the ballot where you are and who your prosecutor is. And, it used to be that your backstop for justice, absent a reasonable local prosecutor, might be the Department of Justice or the FBI, but I guess that's the window too. So, double the responsibility for, making sure you understand who is on the ballot if you've got a prosecutor's race near you.
Yeah,
this is
I agree.
A great reminder. Okay, well, thank you. That'll give us
thank you so much.
Something interesting to look forward to on Monday night if we're not making calls. Otherwise, TiVo it and watch it before you go to bed.
Great.
Thanks, Josie.
And that's 935 prosecutors on the ballot coming up on Tuesday. So look yours up. If you don't know anything about them, send me an email at prosecutortips@gmail.com. I'll give you whatever information I have, and we'll talk.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming by. I know it's a busy time for all of us, and you in particular. I'm glad we could sneak this in and give people one more round of tweaking about the down ballot and prosecutorial races where they live before Tuesday.
Yep. Thank you so much. I'm happy to come back.
Okay. Terrific.
All right.
Have a good weekend. Work hard.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
We'll talk to you again later. Thanks, Josie Duffy Rice, for updating us on yet another horrible prosecutor facing the voters on Tuesday, this time down in the Tampa, Florida area. Wow. That is some story. Amazing and it happens everywhere. Okay, time though for us to wrap things up. Roll our outro music, tell you what's going on the after show so they can get you caught up on the day's stories that we either didn't get to or didn't finish. I apologize to, let's see, and I did open it up here too. Was it Grant Brown who asked me to read the Newsweek story? I think I'm going to go ahead and do it too, and I'll record it and make it a part of the Monday and Tuesday shows. It seems like an important part of a complete breakfast, as they used to say in the ads. All right, coming up on the after show, if they don't get to it, who will, right? Angle of Repose, Friday. Florida's on my mind, I guess. The mother of an NFL football player for the New York Giants, says the team used her son in an attempt to control her public statements about domestic violence. India is on the verge of becoming a Hindu theocracy. Well, gotta have one somewhere, I guess. And Trump doesn't think the Bible is nearly as good as the books he writes. And you have to put that in air quotes. What's up for the last half today on Friday? Lawmakers call for an investigation of Colonial Pipeline Company. That's a bad name for a pipeline company. After a fatal explosion earlier this week. They do explode from time to time, you know. And a new study reports that the deadliest earthquake in Southern California history may have been caused by deep oil drilling. That's a new one on me. Okay, well, stay tuned for all of that and more on the After Show with Wink and Justice.
From Daily Co's Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thanks for listening, everybody, once again. I will try and get you some new, fresh material for Monday and Tuesday so as not to leave you entirely alone. But honestly, get out of the house Monday and Tuesday. Do your part. I do my part while you're out there. Unbelievable. An amazing opportunity to come up to change the direction of the country. Hope you'll be there with us. Talk to you next week.